Hey everybody, you're listening to the Hisessions Hawaii podcast where we talk about everything local and beyond. I'm John Yamasato, your host, and joining me today is Mr. Nick Kawakami.
Ah, surprise, surprise.
And you may say, why Nick Kawakami? And the reason is because, I think I can say it now because by the time this airs, Devon and Kyle will be back home. Kyle did not want to announce it last week because he's like, oh, I'm not gonna be here, you know. But
for security purposes.
But Devon and Kyle have gone on an Alaskan cruise together.
Fancy.
Yeah, and I was invited, so they didn't you know ice me
I
out or
wasn't.
anything. Nick was not invited. But yeah, so they'll be back by the time you hear this. But that's why they're not here today. It's just because they're on their cruise doing their thing. And I hope they're having a wonderful time. We're going to hear all about it next week, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm thankful that they're gone. Because now I'm here.
Yeah, so now Nick is sitting in as our guest host. So
Nick,
thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Before we begin, let me remind of the listeners of the ways they can stay in touch with the show. There is Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all at Hisessions. You can go to SoundCloud, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts to listen to the podcast. And finally, you can email us at hisessions@yahoo.com. I almost forgot what I was going to say there.
Big pause.
If you want to get in touch with the show. If you'd like to help the show, get more music on the channel, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com, patreon.com, and donate. There, you'll be able to get more in touch with the show, figure out who's going to be on. You can actually come down to the shoots. We have our very new patron, Jim from Pennsylvania. So Jim, thank you very much for being a patron. Thank you for being on the show.
I hope I don't betray any confidences here, but I snuck a look at John's notes, and he wrote new patron Jim Pennsylvania, and I thought the guy's name was Jim Pennsylvania. I was like, wow, what a cool last name.
No, we try not to share last names on here that people have somewhat of an anonymity, right?
Smart.
Yeah, so Jim from Pennsylvania. All right. Although, how many Jim from Pennsylvanias are super into Hawaiian music, I guess. Okay. Sponsors, thank you to Kupu Kupu Landscaping, Landscape Architects. You can call Kevin Yokomura, 808-722-8685 for a free estimate on your landscaping needs, or go to kupukupulandscaping.com. Again, Fort Ruger Market. I did the usual thing, my Rugerlicious, and Nick had that as well. We all had Rugerlicious today, and it was very good. You can find Devon, Kumu 94.7 in the mornings, and Kyle at highlifeclothing.com. Jeez, man, my brain is kind of off today. It's because I don't have my normal crew. But today we have a very special guest, Mr. Dennis Brown, the president and CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters Hawaii. Dennis, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So we've known each other for a long time. Originally from my work with the Locations Foundation back in the day, doing our movie days, and then we've done other stuff, right?
Quite a few things, yeah. Our bowling event.
Oh yeah, bowling events, and then we did a golf tournament thing this year with our buddy James Chan.
Yes.
Who was running that? So James was supposed to be here. But I'm sure he's out modeling somewhere or something like that. But that's okay.
Just in the street.
Yeah.
Being paid for it.
That's right. So today we wanted to talk about Big Brothers Big Sisters. I love this organization, not just because that it's a good cause, but I feel like you guys are really put together well. Like, you know, like you feel like at least when we've done events with you, that things were very organized. It looks like the kids were having a good time, and you see the benefit of where you're donating your money or how the thing's going. And a lot of that comes from the CEO and president. So for you to be here, not only do I want to talk about the organization as a whole, but how you structured it and how you've kept it going for so long, running so smoothly. And I'm sure in your head you're thinking, oh my God, if you only knew the stuff in the background that's gone on. But from at least from a public perspective, which is all I have, because I haven't unfortunately have not donated my time yet, other than the events. But from my public perspective, seems great. So why don't we start out with your background story, because you have an interesting story of how you even got started in Big Brothers Big Sisters. Probably a unique story to any chapter, right?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I believe it is. We have 230 chapters, part of Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. We're one of them. We're independent affiliates of a federation. But yeah, I'm just very, very fortunate and blessed to have been the very first child served by our organization 60 years ago. By the way, we're celebrating our 60th anniversary this year.
Oh, this year?
March 1963. We were founded.
Are you the first to be served by the nationwide?
No.
Oh.
I'm not that old. That's 120 years old.
Oh, okay. See,
We've been around 60
Yeah.
years in Hawaii.
Yes.
Yeah. But so I, my parents divorced when I was 4 years old, and I was actually born in Nebraska. My mom was from Japan. My dad was in the Army during the war, and this is in the early 50s, late 40s, and he brought her to Nebraska, and where his family was, and they were married for 12 years, and so I did know my dad because, like I say, they divorced when I was 4, almost 5 years old, and I was really, really close to him. And really, really just adored my dad. And of course, when you're that age, you don't understand why things don't work out, divorce and all that. So anyway, my mom was determined to leave that area. She was, at least in our little town, Lincoln, the only Asian person that she knew of back in 1948, 49, and I was born in 54. And so she wanted to go somewhere where she could raise her, and I have a younger brother, 4 years younger, her 2 Hapa kids, where there would be, more diversity and more people like us, because there weren't any back then in Nebraska.
I did think about that before, because I was reading your story before the podcast. We have a full Hapa show.
Oh,
Everybody,
All right.
All Japanese Hapa too, apparently.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Very cool.
That's why Devon and Kyle
Give
are
us the
here.
award. Best Hapa podcast.
So she decides, I'm going to just pick up and move to Hawaii. I don't know anybody there, but...
Well, it was, so a couple of factors. One was it had just become a state, 1959.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And second was my dad's mom and her husband at the time lived here.
Oh.
And so my mom thought, okay, I do have somebody there. And of course, just like today, Hawaii is paradise to everyone from Japan, pretty much. Yeah. So that was her dream. Even back then, I got to get to Hawaii, So she took us on a train by herself, 2 young kids from Nebraska to California, got on Pan American Airlines, flew to Honolulu. Get here, her mother-in-law, my grandmother on my dad's side, just tried to discourage her from coming from day one, and but she came anyway. And she said, it's too expensive here, and I can't help you, and whatever. And so, but she came anyway, and they didn't actually. She and her husband ended up moving back to the mainland a couple of years later, but. In the meantime, that was at least they did kind of help her, because she, from Japan, English wasn't even her first language. She was very determined though, and so at least we got settled in low-income housing, Kalakaua homes, as a single mom with 2 kids. So once that happened, then I guess we were kind of on our own after that, because housing was taken care of, which was a good thing. And then. The whole time, like I said, because I was so attached to my dad, and so, that I was kicking and screaming on that train all the way to California. I don't know how she did it, because I understood that I wasn't going to see him again. I figured, and then we get on the plane, and more so, because back in those days, people didn't just hop over to Hawaii from
no Southwest.
Yeah, it was a big deal. So. I was just a really, really troubled kid, and I had, and in the housing with all the influences, she tried her best, but then she also had to work. So,
what area were you housing?
What area?
Yeah.
How do you mean?
Where did you live? Like what?
Oh, Kalakaua homes.
Oh, Kalakaua.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like Don Quixote and stuff.
King Street. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don Quixote wasn't there. That was a drive-in movie theater back then. That whole area, no high-rises, nothing over there. Yeah. Yeah, so and then the first thing that was built was Holiday Mart,
Yeah,
which became
which is what we in the real estate side. That's what it's it's called.
still
yeah.
So I grew up in that area, yeah, and so she was determined to find help for me because not only was it hard for her, but I was in a problem in school. I was just so mad at the world. I felt like had been betrayed, and so I just. She went out and to her credit, even though she didn't speak that much English, just sought help wherever she could get it. And so she got a counselor for me, like a therapist, a social worker. I think it was through the old Child and Family Service, which still exists today. And so he started meeting with me on weekends, and that helped. It was just an hour of kind of talking, letting me vent mostly. And then he became the first social worker hired by the new Big Brothers. It was just Big Brothers to start.
So they started a chapter.
In Honolulu. Yeah. Family court judge Gerald Corbett saw all these boys coming through his courtroom, and as the label was back then, fatherless boys. And he said, that's the one thing these guys all have in common that I see in my court. None of them have a dad. They don't have a male role model.
He saw the pattern.
He did.
Yeah.
And then he said, I've heard of this program on the mainland. We need that here. So he got some local businessmen together, and they started it up. And just so happened, my therapist was the first social worker. I'm sure he might have had other boys that he was working with in it too. And I put an ad in the Old Star Bulletin, said, looking for men who would be willing to volunteer to be role models. And he got 18 responses pretty fast. And one of them was Henry Sumida, local 28-year-old engineer, civil engineer from Pro City.
Oh.
And just as we still do today, 60 years later, he created a profile of all those 8 men, their interests, their personalities, real intensive interview that we still do today. And then he had the boys who he already knew, they had their profile. And our whole goal is we need to make the most appropriate match, but a match that's going to last. Because if it doesn't, if it falls apart in less than a year, there's research that shows we actually could do more damage to the child. Because now, for me, say it didn't work out in 3-4 months for whatever reason, right? And I'm probably going to say, well, I lost my dad. Now, I guess this guy doesn't want to be with me. I don't understand why. They could explain it to me, but I was 9 years old.
It's like negative bias.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then it just by luck, we happened to be the first that he put together and that actually went out on an outing and made it happen. So I think the second one probably happened a couple months later. So it's not like...
What was the first outing?
The first outing? Oh, good question. Oh, yeah. So it was so amazing. We don't really encourage this today. We usually say do something casual, like just go to McDonald's or go to a park or something. We went to this brand new place. No, not quite. Brand new place that had just opened, Sea Life Park, it was called.
Oh, man.
He took me there, and we didn't even own a car. I didn't even have, my mom, she didn't drive or anything. So just to drive out that far, and as we're going out there, he told me, this freeway we're going on is called H1. I said, yeah. He said, I helped design this freeway. He's a civil engineer, so really successful.
They like to do that. My dad's a civil engineer, or was a civil engineer, and we'd be on the Big Island and be like, this bridge? I helped design this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, all right. I like to do that.
Yeah.
But
didn't mean much to me then, but today I understand.
Yeah. When I was little, I was like, okay, man, whatever. Now I'm like, oh yeah, that's.
Now you as a dad, you're like, oh, now you're doing that to your kids too.
Oh, well, I
do see this house right here.
Yeah, I sold that.
I do that.
Yeah, I do that too. That's why.
Or that a song would come on the radio and I'd be like, or whatever. Like,
of course.
I don't do my own stuff because they know it's me, but sometimes I'll like, I helped this guy talk to this guy get this thing going or whatever,
Of course, yeah.
So, as a
proud,
dad,
right?
you try to toot your own horn.
Especially to your own kids.
Yeah.
They'll appreciate it someday.
Well, what is the psychology a little bit? Because I don't have any background on that side, and I think to myself, well, I'm a dad, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I basically come home and I play video games in my underwear, and sometimes I tell them, don't do that. But that's basically all I do. I'm not doing a bunch of stuff, But just having the presence there is just makes a difference. I guess in your situation, it was a little bit of a resentment thing because you felt like something was taken away.
Mm-hmm.
But so when you have the male figure there, what are they kind of replacing?
Yeah, so what are the things that we like to say and make sure that people understand is, so your first question to me was, what was that first outing? What did we do? And it was a pretty cool one, Sea Light Park. I never would have gotten to go there otherwise. But what we emphasize is, especially to the mentors that we have, the big brothers and big sisters, is it's not important what you do. What's important is the relationship. Because what these kids need is someone who cares about them. So one of our main goals is to help raise or maintain their self-esteem, because that's what's been lost. Like for me, couldn't help even wondering if I was partly to blame for why they split up. So, and then just feeling like I was worthless, and I didn't trust anybody. That's the other thing. I didn't trust anybody. So having someone that you can trust, that you become, really a friend or like a brother or sister. It's really that. So, and you say, well, yeah, you're not doing all these activities with your kids, but just your being there, and then knowing they can depend on you, and that it's always in the back of their mind. So
I'll give you a pat on the back. It seems like you need it.
No. I just feel like a lot of it, I'm just a chauffeur at this point.
No,
that's teenagers.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And
is
activities.
I mean, from I don't know, from just an interested point of view, it seems very simple in that sense. Mm-hmm. Like you have this whole organization that has been around for, including the nationwide over 100 years. Yep. And in that time, you've had time to study things. There's been not only for your organization, but also I'm sure, psychologists around the world are studying child behavior and how to best support children. And even in the small time we were talking before, I keep coming back to the fact that it always seems too simple. All you like your guys' main purpose is to just be, or your main goal is to make sure that the bigs always understand the most important thing is presence. You just not about what you do, not about trying to fulfill a void, trying to get too fancy, or be amateur psychologists.
It's different than make a wish, right? You're being a presence. You're not trying to like wow somebody, right?
Exactly. And it's a consistent presence is the other thing, because that consistency is very important. That's the other thing we emphasize. But yeah, you're right. It's very simple model. It's very, very basic. There was a point in time when we used to say, anybody can do it, and I think that's true to some degree if they're willing to commit to it. Because we ask for a 1-year commitment. Again, the research shows if it doesn't go at least 1 year, not only is it less effective or impactful, you might even be damaging, because so that's one of the things that we look for. And again, it's not trying to replace. No one can ever replace the child's biological parent, and we don't even pretend to do that. In fact, when the language has changed, like I said, when I was the first little brother, we were labeled fatherless boys. I mean, I went around, people would actually say, I hated that, people would actually say that to me, and they were well-meaning, like, we'd be at our church and women would come up to me, and say, oh, you poor thing, you're fatherless, I mean, like, I guess they're trying to sympathize with me or something, but it just made me feel even worse. Label. Yeah. And then the second part of it, other label we don't use anymore, is role model. So back then, the recruitment language was actually, we're looking for role models. You need to be a role model for this child. But it's not even that. It's really more of being a friend. Being a friend who's older and like a brother. And you don't necessarily expect your sibling to be your role model. They might become that in your eyes, but that's not their job, Yeah.
So the organization as it stands today, are you folks in need of more volunteers, or I'm pretty sure an excess of volunteers is never a bad thing, but how's it going now?
Yeah, so really, really interesting what happened during COVID. We actually, when I first started, And I came in brand new, and the staff was telling me, okay, here's our biggest issue. You know, we don't have enough men. We have all these boys, 100 boys on the wait list, and not enough mentors. You know, so some of them are waiting over a year to get matched, and a lot of them just drop out. The parent says, I'm tired. I'm not going to wait any longer. You know. And so anyway, as I'm dealing with this problem my first year, so I think, wow, wouldn't it be great someday if we had more volunteers waiting than kids, you know? And that happened during COVID.
Really?
Yeah. So you might have read about, you know, during COVID, a lot of people, for whatever reason, maybe they lost their job or whatever, weren't giving as much money right away during that time as they had necessarily, but they were looking for ways to volunteer to help families in particular that were less fortunate, right? And so we had that. It actually happened. We had more men waiting, and we always have women waiting because there are not as many girls that apply for our program or moms that apply for their girls. So it happened for a while, a brief while. The other reason that happened is because the number of boys we had enrolling went down, because these single parents, mostly moms, they were struggling. They had other priorities during COVID. They didn't have money. They didn't have food. They didn't have, you know, resources. Their kids couldn't go to school. They were dealing with that at home. They had so many other priorities, so they stopped applying for a Big Brother. That was low on the priority list of survival, right? So we pivoted like most nonprofit organizations did, and we started providing some of those services too. So we did food drives. We had people donate money. Our board members, like James Chan was a good example of that, who actually went out and bought groceries and gave them to us, and we delivered them to families. So doing that kind of thing. But now it's gotten kind of back to normal. It took a couple of years though. So I think only last year we started having more enrollments of boys. Yeah. And then the other way we're dealing with that is we understand that this model is almost 120 years old nationwide and 60 years in Hawaii. And as you say, it's simple, but the world has changed, right, a lot in 60 years, even in 100 years. So that kids today have a lot more activities on their own. And so even when we match two people, they have a tough time. It's sort of like, okay, how about this Saturday morning? Oh no, I have soccer practice or whatever, you know. And so it's sometimes, and going back to what Nick said earlier about it being a simple model, sometimes it's almost too simple. So most of our mentors, especially the males, because I think the women have a different way of bonding, so it's different. With the men, a lot of the men will say, you know, I don't think I'm having any impact here. You know, it's just, I just hang out, we just hang out, and I don't see any change in him. He hardly even talks to me. That's how I was. I didn't even talk to Henry, hardly. He'd ask me questions, but, you know, when I got home, I was just like, wow, what a great day that was, you know, but I couldn't communicate that to him. And so anyway, they feel like that sometimes, and they get discouraged, you know, but because the model, and I think there's always going to be, like our national organization now, we have a new CEO. He's in his second year, and he's the first African-American CEO in our whole 120-year history for a program or a mission that serves mostly on the mainland, African-American children. He's pushing that we need to kind of expand the way we deliver services and help children who have, as we like to say now, face serious trauma in their lives. So divorce is one of those considered serious trauma, neglect, suicide of a parent, that kind of thing, domestic abuse, domestic violence. So there's a whole range of things. But so we can reach more children. And so I was mentioning to you earlier about our after-school program that we started so that we can reach children whose parents, for whatever reason, can't commit to this program, because it's a commitment on the parents' part too, because they have to have the child ready when the mentor's ready. They have to be a part of it. It's a partnership, a three-way, plus our case manager. So 4 people are involved, and you know,
Well, now the world is so different because a lot of things are virtual too, right?
Yes.
So I was thinking about it as you were talking. I hate to bring this up because Kyle and Devon hate it when I talk about video games. but you know, I play a game called Fortnite online with some buddies, and it started off as it was one friend, and he had a group of friends that play, and then I jumped into this group, so I knew none of them except the one guy, you know. But we've been playing for years now, and you're sitting there playing your game and talking. So you talk story. You get to know. I've gotten to know all these guys over the couple. We've met up in person now. We've all met each other, and so I was thinking there could be virtual ways to connect with people too, but also that's the positive side. On the negative side, I mean, my kids, if you left them with an iPad, they would just sit there and do that all day.
Mine too.
And even kids that are don't have much. A lot of them still have they somehow get a cell phone or an iPad or something, and they're just glued to that thing. So they may not be interested in leaving because they have their entertainment in their pocket, kind of thing. So has that been a factor in getting them participation?
Another interesting thing about COVID was we couldn't meet in person anymore. All of a sudden, no more, right?
Yeah.
So we did everything we could to help every one of our matches. It's about 250 of them at the time. Be able to communicate virtually. Whether it was, even if it was just email or texting or, FaceTime. Some of them had access to, internet. Some didn't. So we did everything we could to make sure they all were able to at least meet virtually. And the amazing thing in the beginning, they were meeting way more often because we just asked them to meet once a week or 2 times a month minimum for 4 to 6 hours at a time. So like a half day on a Saturday every other weekend, because they're both busy, right? Now all of a sudden they're meeting 4 or 5 times a week because they find this way to just communicate. They can't see each other in person. So it was like, but after about a couple months of that, it started to get old, and so we really couldn't get them back together in person soon enough. And finally, in November of 2021, I think is when we finally let them start safely. Like the child would sit in the back of the car and do that kind of stuff, wear masks.
Oh yeah,
only do outdoor activities. Yeah,
all this COVID stuff.
Yeah, but the
through.
beauty of that was we learned, that hey. We never told them to communicate that way, and we always tell them go on outings, do something, even if it's just take a walk or whatever. But then we realized, hey, this is a way to get them to meet in between those outings, because again, there's research that shows if they stay connected between the physical in-person outings, the impact is so much greater. And so we encourage that. Now we say even if you're not meeting for another week or 2, at least do a phone call. Say hello, check out, just so that you're checking on them. And it makes a huge difference because the child now knows this guy cares.
Do you have to log those contacts in there?
No. Our case managers check in with the mentor, the child, and the parent on a regular basis. In the first year, it's every month. It's almost irritating for them, I think. But a major reason for that is child safety.
Yeah,
because we have to be sure. Yeah,
because you have this adult communicating with a child, right, and they're texting back and forth and stuff.
Right,
you kind of want to know what's going on, I would assume.
And even when they go on an outing, nobody's with them. We don't follow them. We don't stay with,
that's why the screening must be so important.
Well, it is, but there's never yet been devised 100% foolproof screening. We have the most rigorous of pretty much any organization and we're one of the few that allows this. Child and parent to go. If you go to schools or if you go to the YMCA, they don't allow an adult to even take the child to the bathroom alone. There has to be another supervised. Yeah. So it's understandable. But so for us, our training is ongoing and it's very specialized because each case is different because we have the profile of the child, what their needs are. So we don't just do a mass training because there's some things we cover with everybody, but it's ongoing with the match support specialist, finding out how's it going and how can we, because she's in communication with the parent, guardian, even the therapist sometimes, to find out, is this helping and what should we tell the mentor to do to help? And it's subtle things. They're not professionals, right? They're just volunteers. So so that becomes not just a commitment, but a way for us to keep that communication going and making sure that everything's safe.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, speaking from experience, as I shared with you, my wife was a big.
Yeah.
It's that communication is not only important just mere safety issues and stuff, but also like there's three people. I said there was three people in that relationship. There was the child, or four people. Sorry, there was the child. There was the child's guardian. There was the big, and then there was the caseworker. And all those four people, like, it's almost everybody supports each other in some specific way. Whether it's the child being supported obviously by the big, but then like the big is being supported by the caseworker. The parent is being supported by the big, who's helping to help raise that person. So it's got to be. I mean, it's weird how like you set up something so like I keep saying the word simple, and I don't mean to like diminish what the process is, but it's so great that it's so simple because it's so easy to get lost in. What should I do with the kid? Or how am I going to find time? I'm going to run out of ideas. Or what am I going to say? Or, what is somebody going to be judging me for, who I have? Am I going to be able to, and so you get, it's very easy to get lost in your head. And thankfully, because of that support each way, in all those different directions, plus you guys try to keep it so simple that it ends up being fairly natural in, if there's obviously motivation for everybody to do this, that whole process ends up becoming very natural, and it becomes less complicated in that way.
Yeah, it is. It's really beautiful, and to see how that bond grows. And when we start as young as 5.5, 6 years old, and we'll support them all the way till even age 25 if they want to be supported. Usually by the time they graduate high school, they're ready to be friends on their own, but if they want, and then they can still take advantage of, we have a group activity. We have one coming up this Saturday, as a matter of fact, Ohana picnic day type of activity. So we invite all of them, including all the ones on our waiting list, because we want to at least serve them. Nice. So we have those activities too. So then they get to interact with each other and meet each other and talk to each other too sometimes. And we also do parent support group. We're just starting, and we found that out during COVID. We didn't have that before. We had the BIGS support group for the volunteers, because a lot of them, there are all kinds of things that happen. It's like I said, our case manager does their best to keep giving pep talks to them. Don't worry. Even if he doesn't talk to you, what he tells me is he enjoys going out with you. They've got to tell him that side of it and everything. But this way they can talk to each other and say, oh yeah, sometimes when I go to pick him up, the mom's not ready, and that kind of stuff, or this kind of thing, Other times, and I'll just say, oh wow, well, my guardian, she's always on it, she's there and she's calling me, texting, and all of this. So so they can kind of share experiences, and then advice, give each other advice. I was going to think,
right, because if you're doing so just so that I'm clear based on what you said, so the minimum that you would commitment would be twice a month, 4 to 6 hour outings, but you recommend once a week.
Well, in between, whatever the in between, some of them meet every week, but one in between to at least virtually. I'm
just trying to think, like, if you do once a week, that's 52 outings. I don't know what I would do.
Well, luckily they have case managers to give you ideas and events put together.
And we have events that are not only because it is hard to come up with something to do every time, but it's also free for them. So
and it doesn't have to be anything complicated. A lot of times, Rachel, my wife, would just go to the beach and just have lunch and hang out, and for that, and then that would be it. It's not like you have to bring a goodie bag and have balloons.
Yeah, because by then they become real.
Yeah, you're actually
have a good
interested.
relationship.
The relationship is.
You don't really care
back and forth.
what you do. It's being with the person.
Yeah.
So
I see.
Yeah.
I have a So, and just going back into kind of the motivation of putting from the big side, but from the parent side. So, do you know why your mom signed you up for kind of a mentorship? Because it wasn't big initially. It wasn't Big Brothers Big Sisters initially, right?
No.
Do you know why she did that? Because to me, it's kind of an amazing story considering the era that was all happening. There's not a lot of. As from what I understand, there wasn't a lot of huge social programs that were available at the time. It was probably maybe even looked down upon that she couldn't handle raising her kid, a little bit in that kind of culture. Do you know what the reason why or her thought process was?
Yeah, I'm not exactly 100% sure, but what I know she had told me before she passed away was that I was just so unhappy, and she couldn't, and I blamed her. So she wasn't the one who could take that away. And I'm guessing too that maybe at school, because I was always kind of acting out there, they might have recommended to her, to find something, because I was one of those troubled kids. I never did anything really outlandishly bad, but I was just one of those
Do you apply any of
disruptors?
Do you apply any of those thoughts to, like, you're talking about how during COVID, a lot of the parents would take their kids out of contention for that because for whatever reason. Do you apply kind of that, any of those thoughts to their situations when you're doing the outreach and stuff?
You mean in terms of
like reaching out to parents saying we have this service available?
Yeah. It's that's what we really need to do. We need to focus on that more, I think, on explaining how it could help them, because we in the past have had referrals. So school counselors are one of the the best referrals, because they know what's going on with all the kids, right? Just like me, and it might have been that she told me, although there was no Big Brothers yet. So we do that, but I think it's something that if we had the marketing dollars, we'd want to do that. So now that COVID's over, we're able to get out in front of and speak to groups more. Like at schools, they'll have parents can, after school, we can do presentations. We used to do that a lot, and then during COVID we stopped. So.
Well, I'm assuming COVID really hit the pocketbooks because everyone kind of pulled back for a bit. But have the donations been coming back, and have you been seeing, sponsors and things coming back to help you guys out?
Yeah, I think. Well, the golf tournament was a huge example of that. It was our first one, and we sold it out. We had a wait list of about 8 more sponsors who wanted to come in.
Nice.
And it wasn't cheap. Our top level was $10,000. Yeah, we had that too. That was a draw.
My long set.
But it's been coming back. A lot of the corporate community has been generous. Private companies giving us donations. And of course, we were very fortunate. It was in the news a lot. I know a lot of people know that we were one of the recipients of a Mackenzie Scott gift.
I saw that last year, right?
Last year, about a year ago, in May last year. So that helped a lot. And of course, we're a business, so we were able to qualify for PPP loans and employee retention credit and that kind of thing. So we survived. The challenge now is this year and going forward again, because now things have settled down, so it's not top of mind for everybody anymore. Oh, the nonprofits need help, So we're kind of like rebuilding and.
So as a CEO, I mean, where do you? You're probably spread super thin, but how do you manage an organization like this so that you have, time to get funds, service the clients, quote unquote clients, which are the kids, and the mentors and stuff like that. Is it what does a normal day look like for you?
Well, first of all, I meant to thank you for your opening and the kind words you said about it seems like we're pretty well run and organized and that kind of thing. And like you said, if only you could see behind the curtain. But seriously, that is a tribute to the team we have. All the people that I'm fortunate to have to work with. We have about 25 statewide.
Staff.
15 on Oahu, and they do a great job. So of course we're kind of specialized, like most not-for-profit organizations. We're split into what we call the mission, program services, and that's where you have people who actually have their degrees in social work or case management, and they're so dedicated and committed to that. So they handle all of everything that goes along with that. And then we have our operations side, which is fundraising, finance and marketing and all the other non-direct service things that most foundations and grantors don't care to fund. Mackenzie Scott was one of the big exceptions to that, where he said this is a one-time $1.9 million gift totally unrestricted, and you don't even have to tell us how you use the money. It's yours. We trust you. She calls it trust philanthropy. So it's really about the structure and the organization and who does what. But because we're small, and I think this is true of all nonprofit organizations, even though you have that kind of division between direct services and indirect operations and mission or program, we're a team. We have to work together as a team. So we have a fundraising event like the golf tournament. It's all hands. Everybody's there. If you're a social worker, it doesn't matter. And by the same token too, we try to have our support team, which is much smaller, be at events with the program team too. Like that upcoming, we have a Ohana Day in Waianae this Saturday. Mostly all the staff like to be there.
Is the Ohana Day sponsored by
Big Brothers Big Sisters? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
So
I know
that's
like
considered direct service, so grant money can be
I see.
used for that. Yeah, it's a what we call match activity.
Because I know sometimes you have like well the bowling is you guys too, right?
Yeah.
Was you guys?
Bowling is a fundraiser that we
Yeah,
put on.
but then for our movie day we were putting it on for you
Right,
guys.
right,
So
right.
do you have others that are like that too? Events that
We have a few events like that, yeah, every now and again. That's a really great one, though, because as you guys were talking about before, we know it costs about $2,500 to rent out a theater. And the way they have to do it is actually, make a donation to us, and then we pay
I
the
see.
theater, so that, otherwise, if they're just paying the theater, like when you didn't get a tax write-off for doing that, right? It's a business expense, maybe.
Yeah,
but,
maybe.
But it's a little different than a nonprofit.
Yeah,
100% tax deductible donation, right? So, so we do. Yeah, we have here and there. We have a lot of people who want to, and they'll sponsor activities too, like yoga classes or art. Painting classes for the matches and things. Especially during COVID, we did a lot of those virtually.
Yeah.
Because it was
virtual.
it could be done, yeah, and people were itching to do something if they couldn't get out, at least, have an activity. So we tried to make it. We even did a virtual tour of the USS Missouri, which I wasn't sure how that was going to go, because I've been on the actual in-person tour a couple of times. It was great. It was amazing, and they loved it. And I don't know if it's a function of everybody was just dying for something to do. That's why it was so successful. But I loved it. I thought it was really well done. It was the tour guide, everything.
And going back a little bit to the leadership side of it, though, what from your past do you think has been so? I mean, as a former little. What has been the most helpful thing to get to as the leader now of this company or this foundation?
Yeah, so I think there are some things, and that's why I went into the field I'm in to begin with. Honestly, when I tell my story, and I know a lot of other former little brothers who are in careers, in management at Hawaiian Electric or wherever, and they didn't choose to go into nonprofit just because they were served by one. But in my case, I was inspired to do it. So I didn't think I'd work at Big Brothers Big Sisters. That wasn't a goal or even I thought was a possibility necessarily, but I ended up here. But to answer your question, let's see, what was your exact question again?
No, I'm saying, like, what from your past, like, how some people will say, like, I can point to one particular thing that now I hang my hat on.
So I think in the early years, I'm going on 25 years, so September will be 25 years. I think in the early years, there was a lot more of that. So when I first came in, and a new CEO, it's always dangerous because now you want to make all these changes, right? And the staff is like, what? So, but there were some things, like when I first started, and again, it's 25 years ago, 1998, we hardly had any photographs of the kids, no pictures, and that was not allowed, and it was for the safety of the children.
Right.
He told me. And I'm like, well, I remember when I was the first little brother, it was a big deal because the family court, head of family court, and so he got the governor involved to do a proclamation. We now have Big Brothers in Hawaii, part of this big national organization. There were a lot fewer nonprofits in those days too. Yeah. And so they took me to Ann Henry and the social worker, Ed Miyamoto, to the governor's office, sat me on his desk, Star Bulletin photographer, taking pictures of us. This is little Dennis, and we never use last names. Even today, we don't do that. And we asked for permission, of course, from the Guardian before we can show pictures. And I'll never forget the photographer positioning me on the governor's desk so that he could never see my face. So only see the back of my head, and because it would be like, and I didn't understand, 9 years old, I so I'm sitting there, and it would be like some pretty awkward positions, because I'd sit here, and governor would be there, and they twist my body so the back of my head, so I couldn't see my face, and it was so strict that, he would say, oh, wait a minute, I can still catch a little of his face, turn his body more. So anyway, I always remembered that. I said, maybe this is something that to be ashamed of. And so maybe I shouldn't be. So I didn't want anybody to know. I didn't tell people. Like at school, nobody knew until one day another little brother raised his hand and told this is when I was sixth grade teacher, did you know that Dennis was the very first? I was like mortified, because I just worked so hard not to everybody, because I thought there was something not good about it, but it was for my own safety, right? Sort of like, the runaway children and things like that. They try to protect them, right? Or Amber Alert kind of thing. Anyway, so my first day actually in the job, we had a staff meeting, and somehow that subject came up about pictures, and so I told this story to let them know, how that made me feel. And I said, I think we should show pictures. We don't have to put the names on, but we should be proud that we're serving these kids. So ever since then, we do.
Oh, that's a cool story.
Yeah, videos and all. So a few things like that I can relate to. I think now, 25 years later, there's been so much change that what happened to me is not always relatable, to today's world. Like, we had no computers, we had no virtual,
Right.
So it's very, very different. But yeah, they're certainly, in my heart and everything. Yeah. So I think that way.
Yeah.
And one of the things that even our national organization, we have a new strategic plan with the new CEO that I brought up in a meeting a couple months ago at the national office in Tampa, because I was asked to help put that strategic plan together. They said, we need to improve the volunteer experience. Maybe we're having a hard time recruiting volunteers because the experience is lacking. And then they had done a lot of focus groups and a lot of research, and they came up with, and I raised my hand. I said, yeah, I agree with that, but I think, can we also look at how we improve the family experience? Because the way I put it was, because my wife's a elementary school teacher, and she used to teach special ed and then the gifted and talented program. So they had a pull-out. They would take the child out of regular class, and they would go for special ed. Right? And so I said, I see our program is kind of like that. We pull the child out from the family, and they go out and they have a great time with their big brother or big sister, and then they take them back and they go right back in the family. The family hasn't changed. The dysfunctions, all the issues that are going on are still there. So since COVID, because we kind of had to interact more with the families, that's what we do now. We see ourselves serving the entire family, so we do whatever we can. And we're not trying to take the place of Child and Family Service or PACT, but wherever we can, add value. Like when we do Locations Movie Day, it's the whole family.
That's siblings, right. Everybody comes. Yeah.
Which it's so nice they're generous enough to allow that. Of course the theaters are big, so but
yeah.
You got to get Compass on board now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I no longer work at Locations, but I have nothing bad to say about the Locations Foundation.
The foundation
it's a very good.
outstanding. Yeah.
Well, and Locations. So I have nothing bad to say about Locations either. But the Locations Foundation does a lot of good work, and they do. Yeah, many events over the year. It's amazing how much they do.
Right, yeah. We did a few other things, like you said, with them, too. I think we did some cleanups, stream cleanups.
But I always, like I said, I always enjoyed working with you guys, because whenever we do events with you, it's like everything was always organized and easy. I don't know. And my job was never that hard, because I was always the videographer, photographer, taking
remember that,
photos and stuff like that. But you can see, like there's certain... nonprofits that you roll in, and it's like, where are all the kids? Oh, some of them couldn't make it, or whatever, and it's confusion and whatnot. But you guys always seem to be on top of it. So yeah.
Well, it's great to have a good team that they just love what they do, and
And you choose to be a very public front CEO. I see at all the events.
Mm,
You're shaking everybody's hand. You're talking to everyone. Is that a conscious decision?
You're here on the podcast.
You're here on the podcast.
Yeah, I never turned down an opportunity. But no, it's I've learned over the years and become very comfortable with it. And in the beginning, I didn't know much about marketing or anything, so I didn't feel that. I honestly didn't think it was that important that I wasn't that important, and I had to really, in taking more trainings and hearing from people, understand that it's really not even just about me, right? It's about being the face of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
I got to where I enjoyed it.
It's a huge change from when you were 6 years old and you were saying, I don't want to tell anybody about this.
Exactly. Yeah. And of course, the fact that I have the story helps a lot too. So yeah.
Well, last question second to last question. But so, how was it being Hapa back then? Because I've grown up, everyone used to tell me like, oh, being Hapa is great and all this stuff, and then I saw some TikTok where it's like, certain places Hapa's not desired,
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
And I'm like, wow. I always thought I was like
that? Don Quixote?
it's a podcast, but it's like you're not.
Well, for me, in elementary school, it was actually kind of hard. There weren't that many back then. And because maybe a number of factors, but because my mom was from Japan and she's who I lived with, and I kind of being brought here was now away. Although I went to kindergarten on the mainland, so. And no one else looked like me there. It was the opposite, right? It was all Caucasian.
Yeah.
But I blended in really fine. My dad was Caucasian, and so, and that was all his family we were living with back then. Then I come here, and I identified so strongly with being Japanese that I thought I actually looked Japanese to everybody. Maybe I got that from being up there where I knew I was a little bit different. Right. But no, here, all the Japanese kids, they to say pretty much didn't take to me. So I was bullied and I was teased. And so that was another reason my mom sought help for me, I think. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't extreme, like, you didn't get into too many fights or anything, but I was different. And
I didn't even know that. I didn't know that part of even history in Hawaii in that sense because
there weren't that many.
Our generation, I feel like everyone was like, "Oh, you're Hapa. Oh, you're so handsome."
Yeah. So
maybe not just me. Maybe just people are telling me I'm
That's
super
what
handsome,
I always said, And then I thought, oh, and then I found out maybe it's just my mom was telling me that. Boost up my self-esteem or something.
Is your wife?
Yeah.
Our wives are telling us that.
And I've seen it change over the generations. Like even by the time I got to high school, it was starting to change. That same thing. Yeah. Oh, well, my basketball coach said, well, someday you're going to be good looking, you're Hapa. And I was already in high school. I thought, well, when's that going to happen? Cause
maybe your basketball coach was like, ooh, he's going to be tall. Holly said kick in.
But yeah, so it's different. It was, but yeah.
That's interesting.
And I know, it's kind of, it was very interesting. Even when I went to, because I forget how, but I got involved in the YMCA for a little while and went on one of the camps with them, and that was kind of rough.
Well, and overall too, it's your life has got to be is got to be pretty unique in the sense that because your job so overlaps with your childhood and all that stuff that you almost relive so many memories over and over again, whether it's telling us here on the podcast or how you lead or whatever that is. And to me, that's the most fascinating thing about what you're doing is that I'm not doing things that I did. I'm not climbing a jungle gym for a living. Although I wish I was. That would be a great job.
That would be great.
Or whatever important event was in my childhood. But you're actually have the gift of being able to not only have that experience and be able to speak from that experience, but also take even the hardest parts of that experience and now turn it into something
that's
wonderful.
Very insightful. I've wondered about that myself, and it's really true. And what's interesting for me too is, like I said, September will be 25 years. when I first started, I didn't think I was going to last a month. When I found what's involved in being a CEO, like you were saying, all the different duties and what a day looks like and all that. And then secondly, I had never worked at a job in my life more than 7 years, which was my previous job to this. Most of the other was just 1 year. I was just moving all over the place, which back then was really bad. Today it's kind of common, but back then it was really bad. And so I gave myself, I said, maximum 10 years. But what I've found, I just haven't been able to leave for that reason, because it's passion for me. And I feel really, really it is a gift. It's a gift to be able to give back to the organization that helped me in whatever way I can.
And so many people can go to their childhood and think of only the negative stuff and not want to, and take those as like...
For both of you, wasn't music a part of your
growing
up?
I guess. I started kind of late though, like 13, 14.
You did? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So it wasn't
but still
part of my younger days.
Yeah.
For my dad was a musician.
Right,
so
right,
totally.
right.
But I mean, it wasn't but my point is just like the strength that yours comes from, and I don't mean to say negative in the sense like, but it is. You had a hard childhood, and most people would bury that. Most people would go through therapy to try to work through it. You're like embracing it 100% to say like, this is who I was, and this is why what I'm doing is so important.
Yeah, I know, and I question myself sometimes because who sees this as a negative or saw it was my mom. My mom said, "Aren't you ashamed? Aren't you embarrassed to be telling?" Because my story's been in midweek like 3 times. And she just and so I was disappointed at that. I thought, wow, she's not proud of me at all, for what I'm doing. But I know she didn't really understand it all
probably
either.
Some shame for her too. Because she was responsible.
And I tried never to blame her. In fact, my story is usually how fortunate I was to have a mom who went out and did this, but I found out from her friends, because she was one of those people who just volunteered all over the place her whole life, and I went to a Child and Family Service celebration of volunteers, and she was one of the ones being honored, and they told me, they said, don't think that she's not proud. She really is. She has a scrapbook you haven't even seen with newspaper clippings of you. So, and then when she passed away and I cleaned out, I found it.
That's cool.
There, yeah. But she always says, you sure you want to do it? She didn't say it like,
That's very Japanese of her.
Very.
She's trying to protect you, that's why.
Very, No, that's it. And I didn't get it at first, because I was just so wrapped up in how can she not be proud of me? This is like my biggest accomplishment.
That's cool.
So, but that's interesting. That is interesting. Yeah.
Okay, we have one more question. Has nothing to do with Big Brothers Big Sisters, because we technically are a music channel. So we asked this of all our guests. If you were stranded on a desert island for the rest of eternity, and you had to take 3 albums with you to listen to, what music would Dennis Brown take with him? And you don't have to say the best of Dennis Brown, the reggae artist, because I already know that. So besides that one.
Man, I have so many. That's hard. Pick 3. There was one on one of your podcasts that was mentioned, and now I'm drawing a blank on it, but Sunday Manoa.
Oh yeah, okay.
Because I grew up,
You're right at that time, Peter Moon. Yes.
Peter Moon.
Is it up here?
No. Is it? Oh, it is there. Okay.
Crack Seed.
Crack Seed. Yeah. And
you can say Pure Heart too if you're drawing a blank.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, with John and Jake. Well, I'm again, probably dating myself, but guy of the 60s and the 70s. Probably.
Well, if you're 60s and 70s, are you thinking like Eagles?
Yeah, Eagles is one. Yeah, Eagles is probably the one.
Desperado.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And
I respect that choice.
Both good. Yeah.
Yeah. And
what's funny is I never knew much about the Eagles until that Hell Freezes Over came out.
Oh.
I just never got
That was
into him.
much
But my
later.
parents never listened to him, so I just didn't have any exposure. This is pre-internet.
Yeah.
And then Hell Freeze, and then you go and you listen to all.
I know. I think that came out the year I was born.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and then I'm just a very big Van Morrison fan. So,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I
Van
think it was
Morrison's great.
Poetic Champions Compose. I think that's one.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
a great album.
I love Van Morrison too. All right. Okay. Well, Dennis,
Okay.
thank you so much for being here.
Awesome.
Appreciate it for coming into the podcast.
Do you want a quick plug on how they can volunteer if they want? People can
Oh yeah,
volunteer
yeah.
if they want to.
I'll put the website in the
Okay.
description as well. But
Great.
where can people find information on Big Brothers Big Sisters?
Yeah, so bbbshawaii.org is our website, and at bbbshawaii for our Instagram.
medias.
Yeah,
Cool.
social media. Yeah.
All right.
And phone number for those who like to do it, 808-521-3811.
Okay. So that's how you get in touch with them. We'll be back next week with the return of Devon and Kyle.
I'm out of here.
Nick, I should say thank you, Nick, so much for sitting in. Nick,
My pleasure.
You're
Thanks,
great.
John. Thanks for having me.
And it's good to see you.
Yeah.
We'll see you all next week. Thank you.